Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and back from his worldwide trip is JP Marzullo. How you doing, JP?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, it's a long trip, but yeah, it was well worth it.
So JP is back in studio with us. As always, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by Wilson Hill Pistol Club, 1732 Lakeshore Road, right here in Manchester, New Hampshire. It is the oldest sport shooting club in the state, and the membership is open first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Again, at that address. The website is wilsonhillpistol.org, where you can find out information about the club meetings and all the training coming up. The next training, I told you the training was eventually going to start up this fall. November 5th is the FAST handgun. FAST stands for Fundamentals and Safety Training. It doesn't stand for fast. So your fundamentals and safety training, which is kind of your first level training, is November 5th. It's a Sunday, so you can look for the information on online for that. And then the defensive handgun level 1, Sunday, November 12th. That's what's coming up. The defensive handgun series is actually quite a fun series. You go through the fundamentals training, which is your lower level, and then you get your defensive handgun 1, and you start talking about home defense and how you handle and prepare for defensive situations. Defensive handgun 2 gets you a little further along into that process. So there's classroom portions and shooting portions on all of these classes. Defensive handgun 2 gets you thinking about a little bit more speed, accuracy, understanding the difference between being 100% accurate and just being effective, right? You don't need a bullseye to hit center mass and protect yourself, right? And stop. And then handgun 3 actually does get into drawing from the hip and doing other things like that.
Nice.
It's a lot of fun. Anyway, check that out. Again, those are our sponsors. JP, we have a guest, Scott Wallace, representative from, let's hear it.
How you doing? I represent Danville, New Hampshire, which is Rockingham County, District 8. I've been in the House. This is my 8th year, so 4th term. I currently am seated as Vice Chair of Judiciary Committee. I've served on the Criminal Justice and Public Safety for the last 6 years, and here we are. We're back at it.
All right.
So I sort of had to bribe him to come in. You know how hard it is sometimes. So,
yeah.
I have something for him that I'll give him now. So,
Oh.
This is a Chips helmet from California.
Oh.
And I worked out in California a couple of projects, and one of the guys I met out there said, you ought to take this home to the East Coast with you to remember us. So you'll notice that the emblem is off. And inside there's a number, which I'm guessing was the person's number. And I even left some of the dings in it. I didn't try to scrape them up. There's different colors and stuff. So when you're ready to leave, I'll give it to you. There's not a lot of room over there, but thanks for coming. And please, I know you'll take care of this.
Yeah, that's going to go right in the man cave.
There you go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, So tell us about, you spoke earlier that you were on criminal justice?
Correct.
Are you on criminal justice now? No, you're on judiciary now.
Correct.
But you're on criminal justice. You are a justice of the peace.
Correct.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, which one? Criminal justice or justice of the peace?
Any of it.
Well, being a JP, it's more or less for doing real estate transactions, weddings, and things like that. But it's a good gig.
And
a little
you
good part-time job.
You were on criminal justice because you worked with Rockingham County.
No, I was. As you know, as you serve in the House, you also have some county responsibilities. And my freshman year, I was selected to go on the executive board, so I ended up serving as chair of the jail, the budget committee, and then stayed there for several years, and then recently I'm now with the Sheriff's Office. Just doing the budget subcommittee, basic stuff. So
I got you.
We've got our budget review on Friday morning. So,
Yeah,
and that's all we do with that. So,
Yeah.
All right, all right.
So tell us about maybe a bill I know that people would love to hear about.
that's got some attention.
Yeah, I think we'll get some interesting comments on this later. But
Sure. Well, I did file my hobby distillation of spirits bill again, which would provide for that you could actually brew your own. You can brew your own wine and beer presently, but if you want to take that hobby to the next level and maybe make some brandy or bourbon or something like that, you need to be able to do that. As you know, in New Hampshire, all things related to alcohol are Mother May I. The Liquor Commission has an iron grip on the all things related to alcohol, so you need their permission. In most states, it's been legal to make your own wine and beer since time immemorial. But in New Hampshire, it only became lawful in 2013, and so we can make up to 100 gallons of wine or beer in a one-person household, or 200 gallons in a two-person household. But that's it. Beyond that, if you let's say you're making a batch of beer and something happens to it, you've got a lot of time and materials in making that, and rather than pour it down the drain, you could run it through a still and condense it and make it into something else. But that's presently not lawful in the state. So my bill would allow you to concentrate or distill that wine or beer or a mash or a wash and make that into an alcohol. So it's pretty straightforward. So it takes a lot of work, but.
So how many times has this come up now? It seems that I can remember it. I think
this might be the 5th time I filed this bill, and we've made it to the House floor once. We've been retained a couple of times, but I get a different vibe this year with some things that are happening because there's been a lot of changes. In the last 2 years, 9 states have passed similar legislation. So as it sits right now, it is legal, not federally, but at the state level to distill your own spirits in Alaska, Arizona, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, and Rhode Island. So we're surrounded with that here in New Hampshire.
Right. Maine, I can believe.
Yep.
Massachusetts, that one's a kind of a shocker, though.
I would agree with that.
Why isn't Massachusetts just jumping on that tax-wise?
Well,
you need a permit to do anything in Massachusetts.
It's probably because a lot of the Massachusetts legislators come up here to New Hampshire to buy our discount liquor. We've seen plenty of TV stories on that. So it's pretty interesting. I think it would. There's actually quite a few still distributors here in the state. I mean, you can make anything in it. Distill water. Tinctures, anything like that. But
right.
My bill would allow you to be able to use that device for the particular purpose of producing alcohol.
Now, I got a couple of questions along those lines. You, as the sponsor of this bill, should have the answers to these. So the first question is, if this is the 4th time it's come up, how did it go last time? Like you said, it got to the floor once, it's been retained. What type of resistance are you getting that puts him into those positions?
The big hurdle has been that where it's still unlawful federally, the chairman of the Commerce Committee didn't think it would be prudent to put that bill forward. So
wait a minute. All of these states, it is not lawful federally to possess marijuana, yet we've already crossed that bridge in how many states?
Well, exactly. All of the ones that surround us, and which is exactly why I said I'm going to file this again this year, because rumor has it we're going to have a recreational cannabis bill this year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
if that one passes, then yours should be a no-brainer.
That's correct. And, at this point in time, again, we've got some other states that are nearby that are doing this. And there is a move to get this changed at the federal level on what we call the hobby size. This is not at all moonshining like you see on the TV show. The hobbyists are artisans. We're craft distillers. So it's not about producing a large volume to be able to make some money on. It's about producing something that's really nice, of fine quality, and then maybe you can bring that to some competitions, and maybe some big distiller would pick it up, and there might be a business opportunity there. So it's pretty interesting.
All right. So the major hurdle is the disconnect between what would be legally at the state level and what would be legal at the
Correct.
federal
That's
level.
been the hurdle at this point in time. There was a bill, I think it was around 2016, HR 3249 in Congress. The Hobby Distillers Association was able to get a member, I believe from Michigan, to put the bill in. It was tabled, but we do have some support. We're still trying to get that going. And the whole idea was, I'm going to give a little shout out to Jimmy Carter. He signed into law the Hobby Brewing Act in 1979, I believe, and thereabouts. So he made it lawful for people to home brew and home vint back in the day, and with these 100 and 200 gallon limits. So it only made sense, from my perspective, to have a bill that might get some traction by only being able to use that 100 or 200 gallons of wine or beer, which is what a mash is, or a wash. If that's legal federally, why not take that and concentrate it? Think about it. The alcohol is created during the fermentation process.
Yeah, it's already done.
That's correct.
The alcohol exists already.
So
now we're just refining it.
We're just concentrating it.
Yeah.
Just like turning grape juice into grape jam. You put it in your pressure cooker on the stove and boil it down. That's not how distilling's done. In fact, most of it's done electrically at this point in time. They have these small countertop plug-in, you put a gallon in there and you get about a pint out of it, from what I understand. So it's kind of, instead of a Mr. Coffee, it's a Mr. Bourbon.
And who doesn't want a Mr. Bourbon
That's
first
exactly
thing
right.
in the morning, right?
I'll pass.
And so the next question I have is, you did say that, well, just like anything else, like drug paraphernalia or anything like that, it's not illegal to own these things.
That's
What
correct.
is illegal is what you do with it,
Correct.
right? So all of these things are already legal in the state of New Hampshire.
Correct.
Who's distilling their own stuff without telling anybody?
I'm sure plenty of
You
people
can't
are.
tell me that it's not already taking place.
Oh, I've spoken to
It's just not being talked
My
about.
Uncle Nunzio, with wine, he would have been stopped probably, but yeah, it's been going on for years.
Did he make grappa out of the pomace? But there's actually a local guy that I think it's New Hampshire Still Works. He's actually not too far from here. They make them right here in Manchester, and they sell them all over the world.
Distillery.
No, the stills.
The
Yeah,
still-
they're all handmade
yeah.
copper right here in Manchester. Yeah,
Wow,
Yeah,
nice.
that's good. Yeah.
So what type of enforcement? I mean, it doesn't feel like I've heard of anyone being busted for running a still in New Hampshire. It doesn't feel like there's any current enforcement. This would.
Well, you're right, and I think what it is, it's not a problem because it's done on such a small scale and people aren't selling it.
Right.
It's personal consumption, just like having a garden and grow your own tomatoes. Well, if you make, like I say, you make wine, and it comes out with a bad batch, you can still make some good brandy out of a bad wine.
Yeah.
So
So I'm told.
so
Or would you
so
believe, right?
Going forward, okay, I'm able to make 200 gallons a year because my wife lives with me, right? So 200 gallons a year,
Of wine or beer or mash.
one or the other.
Yes. It's not clear in the statute, but I interpret it as 200 gallons total, not 200 of wine, 200 of beer.
Oh no, but 200 total.
Correct.
Right. And so if we add that, so now I've got 200 for a family of two.
Right.
But I can't sell it.
Correct.
I can use it personally. I can give it away.
Correct.
Could
I
ask
can
for
take it to a
donations.
craft fair.
Correct. Or competitions like
Or competition,
Distiller
yeah.
Showcase that's coming up. Yeah.
And I can I bring it across state lines to show a major brewer who wants to pick it up?
I would recommend not doing so. That's where the commerce
Yeah.
clause,
Interstate commerce.
So at
that's
this
where
point-
you'd really run afoul of the feds.
What if a local brewery, like mountain-based brewery in Goffstown, right?
Yeah.
This is that's all they do. They
make beer.
They make beer. They don't even have. I think they have like snacks, but they don't sell food or anything. It's just a place to go and try crafts beers. Would a place like that be able to buy my bourbon and resell it because they have a liquor license?
No, because you cannot sell it. But what they could do is they could get the smallest scale distiller's license here in New Hampshire, which I think is about $300, and they could make their own and then sell it.
I got you. So there's also that option, right?
Correct.
I mean, if I wanted to get a distiller's license, I could go and pay for it, and I could distill in my house,
That is correct.
and still with limits. But then I could sell it. But I could sell it to a distributor because I don't have a liquor license to serve it.
Correct. It all has to go through the Liquor Commission.
So now we're talking oversight by the Liquor Commission.
Correct, but you'd also need a federal license in addition to the state license, and you'd need to file quarterly reports with the TTB, with the feds as to the disposition and the quantities and of product that you've made. And it would have to be, the reporting is very, very in-depth, because it's a function of the proof of the liquor that you're making as to what the tax rate is. The higher the proof, the higher the tax.
Gotcha.
So just like wine and beer. But so there's a lot of paperwork and headaches that go along with that if you want to go that route and just
So
get a small
this
license.
basically it takes away both the state and the federal licensing.
This
You
is
know,
again,
Grandpa can have a still in his basement if he wants to.
as long as he's not selling it and he's not making that would be the intent of the bill.
I
Yes.
got you.
So, as other bills go, you have to have support from people on the other side of the aisle, usually, if you want it
And
to
I do.
if you want it to get through, right?
Correct.
What committee will this go to? Because it's crazy sometimes when they split up bills for committees. Where would
Yeah,
this one go?
This is going to Commerce in
Okay.
the House,
Okay.
and I imagine there must be a Commerce committee
In the
on the
Senate.
other side of the wall too.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't-
I've got 5 Senate sponsors already. Yeah.
Any Democrats on that, or are they all?
No, I don't have a good relationship with any of the Democratic senators. If I
Right.
did, I would
But
at this
in the
point.
House?
No,
No.
not at this point. I think it's full, but there's.
Yeah,
I'm
was
still
just
getting
curious,
some.
because sometimes that helps.
Yes, I think that would.
And they
I'd
must
get some
they
room for
must
some.
drink occasionally too.
From
I
time
would
to time,
think,
I'm sure.
yeah.
So it goes to Commerce, but wouldn't someone like Judiciary have to kind of get involved a little bit just because of the disconnect with the feds? What's going to happen if the feds come in?
It's a good question.
You see what I'm saying? Well,
I
I mean,
think
wouldn't we have to kind of somehow reconcile that?
I think the way that it works is all things alcohol related go to Commerce. Period.
got you.
You know, as far as the criminal penalties, that would go to criminal justice and public safety.
Right.
If there was but I don't see how judiciary really has any. That's not under our purview, from my perspective. But yeah, but it's interesting. So that would be.
Well-
I'd like to see. We'll see what happens, but it's getting a lot of attention. Nationally. I've had some people from other states reach out, and they really like this. They're trying to get this done in some other states, and they thought by limiting it to only the 100 or 200 gallons of wine, beer, or mash that you make, that might get them the ability to get it signed into law.
It's a first step for future kind of things. I mean,
Correct.
Sometimes you have to take a little just so that you can move forward.
Correct.
So take what you can get.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, 100 gallons is quite a bit, right?
For
Well-
2 people.
Have you ever made wine or beer at home?
I haven't,
It's a lot of work.
but I know how much whiskey I drink in a year, and it's not 100 gallons.
It's cheap. It's probably cheaper and easier to buy it. Because
So that's the point.
we have a lot of Concord grapes on our property, and we do make grape wine, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I mean, to do a 30-gallon crock is what I make it in. An old pickle barrel, ceramic one, and it takes a lot of work, and you really have to have spotless environment in which to do it because bacteria is your enemy. So,
So-
you got to have a sanitary location, all stainless steel. It's really to do it right. You got to be real careful.
So the video of Lucille Ball stomping on the grapes isn't how you do that, right?
No, that's not how I do it.
Oh, okay.
I actually have a masher.
All right, just wondering.
It's made out of oak. Yeah. But it's
So
it's
what-
certainly one of the lighter subject matters that we deal with at the house.
Yeah.
In being late.
I would think,
who would enforce that?
being this lighter subject matter, that you would get more support than you have over the last few years.
Well, again, we'll see. If we can get it out of committee and onto the House floor, I think we're going to have a different result this year.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And I do expect to have at least one or two Democrats
Nice.
in the House to co-sponsor. Yeah.
Yeah, I can
That
think of-
email's flying around. This just got released yesterday, so
Oh, nice.
so we're in the seeking co-sponsors
super.
mode right now.
So
So
what?
any of my Democratic friends listening, please reach out. We've got room for you.
Can you lobby for it by bringing your own batch of stuff and say, here's what you can do at home? I don't know.
I'm not going there.
And the more samples you give out, the
better
more
the vote goes.
susceptible
Yeah.
they'll be.
Yep.
Yeah.
It did have an interesting floor speech from the representative from Kingston. He actually managed to work the Beverly Hillbillies into a floor speech 6 years ago.
See, we did have some fun in there. Yeah,
Yeah,
not all the time,
exactly.
but sometimes.
Exactly.
So what else are you doing? What's going on with you?
Well,
Anything coming up that we should know about?
Yeah, we've got some another bill that I'm really behind that come out of the Special Committee on Housing, which I also sit on. And this bill would provide that only the zoning ordinances, septic, any of the approvals,
Town.
ordinances, state,
Right.
all that jazz for setbacks and things like that. If you go through the process and get a subdivision approved, or you go and you pull your building permit, only the zoning laws, ordinances, and all that are in effect at the time of issuance of that permit can be used for the inspection purposes and issuance of a CO. I do some building here, and then I've run into that more than once. You get your building permit,
And then they changed the rules.
and things happen. Well, with COVID, I won't mention the town, but they pulled the rug out from underneath me twice.
Yeah.
So that's part of the motivation. But when we hear this from big builders that build from Coos down to
Sure.
Nashua, this happens all the time. You go in, you get your permits, everything's all set, you're about ready for the final walkthrough, then the town says, geez, that's all well and good, and I know we didn't require that, and it's not in the zoning ordinance, but if you want us to sign off on that, we got to have this done. And then they got you.
So
That
that happened to me.
absurd.
That happened to me. We had
Of
our
course
house
it did.
built in the small town.
Yep.
Won't be named right now. They made me put in a sprinkler system.
Yeah.
I am exactly 1/2 mile away from the fire station.
Yeah.
And they forced me to put in a sprinkler system.
That happened to me.
And no one else, to my knowledge, that built after me had to do that. Because the guy-
Residentially, that's gone away most times.
yeah. And so it cost me an extra $10,000 or $15,000. Got a 500-gallon water thing in my basement.
Sure.
Plus all the stuff. The only good part is in case there's something going on, I have plenty of water. And second of all, my insurance is lower on
Oh, it
my
is?
house insurance because
Good.
I have a sprinkler system. But I don't think it's going to amount to $10,000 or $15,000 that I've saved, certainly. But you're right. So I'm glad that's going away now because.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good things coming out of that Special Committee on Housing with regards to auxiliary dwelling units, and we're really strengthening property owners' property rights because let's face it, that's right. That's what we do. In life, pursuit of happiness and property, and all our property rights are really important. So, and they're being eroded rapidly.
Yeah.
So we've got to dig in and hang on to that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
That is absurd. I mean, I have this vision of something like that where someone gets their permits and it takes a year or two to build whatever it is they're building. Whether it be a house and they're doing it, quickly, or they're either
their own,
they're doing it on their own. Like a construction company might raise that house up in 6 months and be done with it and sold off, right? So there's very little chance that rules are going to change. But someone who's doing it piecemeal gets their building permits. Okay, you can build a house here, and they lay a foundation, and then they wait 6 months. They got some money. They do the next piece, and then do the next piece.
Well, COVID happens.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can't get anybody
materials
to work, and you
Or
can't get any materials.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a piece of plywood goes to $90 a piece, or it's just insane what that was. But then they say, oh wow, since you got that permit, we changed the rules on what types of materials you can use. Now you got to tear the thing down and start over, right? I mean,
something.
That's the horror story that is in my head that could happen.
Yeah, well, and that's we in the legislature, we cannot make any laws retrospectively pursuant to the New Hampshire Constitution. So as such, why should municipalities or counties or state agencies be able to do that? It's de facto unconstitutional. Right. So that was the impetus for that particular bill, and it's got broad bipartisan support. Every member of the committee is 100% on board, and that committee is really doing some good work. It's a very functional committee.
Your committee.
That special committee on housing.
Committee,
yes, yeah, everybody's working really well together, and there's a lot of good things coming out.
That's good.
So now I envision the local municipalities. Okay, we're gonna have a selectmen meeting. We're gonna go over some new stuff that we want to implement, and they've got a list of new things that they want to implement. It hasn't been implemented yet, but they've got their list, right?
Correct.
So now I go over here and I want to get a building permit before all that stuff goes in because I know it's coming.
Correct.
Right? And the person who issues building permits says, "Nah, I'm going on vacation. I'll talk to you in a couple weeks." Right? And start stalling the process because they want to get all this stuff through before they issue any more permits. I just feel like games like that are. Of course, there's nothing we can do about that. That's going to happen.
That does happen, and I've heard through the rumor mill that there are municipalities working on things right now because of what they expect is coming. So they're looking on tightening up some of these zoning ordinances and things like that. But we'll see.
All right.
Isn't there a regional committee for, I don't know whether it's housing or land development or something? What is that?
I think there's county by county. There are
regional planners, I think.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's more. I don't know if that's for single-family homes or anything like that. That's
curious.
more where my focus was for the small, for the housing.
Those people on the show before, maybe with Gary.
I think it was before me.
We talked about the planning commissions for regions of New Hampshire that are kind of dictating how a particular region grows.
Yes. Yeah.
They are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anything else?
Well, that's all the interesting
Are
stuff.
you traveling somewhere soon? Or
Actually, yes. There's a delegation from New Hampshire. There's two of us that are going to have been invited by the governor of Taiwan to develop and further develop economic and cultural ties with Taiwan.
Wasn't there recently something in Boston where they?
Yes.
You were at that, right?
Yeah. Well, a bunch of us were down at, including the speaker, were down at what's called Double 10 Day, which is 10/10. Which is equivalent to our Independence Day.
Oh, okay.
10/10, October 10th, 1911 was when the Republic of China, that was their founding, if you will.
Okay.
And of course, there's been some turmoil over there with World War II and whatnot, but they're very much engaged in the global economy. They're the sixth largest economy in the world. When you think about that small island.
Right.
That's amazing. New Hampshire does somewhere around $300 million a year in trade with Taiwan, New Hampshire businesses.
Directly?
Wow.
Directly, yes. So
Wow,
they're looking to further develop that, and obviously I'm sure they're strengthening allegiances, considering what's going on globally at this point
Sure.
in time. Yeah, so looking forward to
would
that.
this
It should be interesting.
delegation take place before the start of next session, or?
We're leaving Sunday.
Oh.
Yep. So it's out of the bag. Yes, we'll be there for a week or so. We'll be back at the beginning of November.
Oh.
That's
should be interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just New Hampshire. This is it's New England legislators. So there's representatives and senators from Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. I'm not sure if Maine is included in that, but it's
So
quite
who
lovely.
picks up the tab for that trip? The people that invited you there?
Yes.
Okay. That's,
Yes,
I
yeah.
want
Oh,
everybody to
The
understand
Taiwanese
that.
government, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's a pretty hefty.
Yeah, I can
I'm
imagine.
telling you, put it on your list. Ask for a tour of that new submarine.
You
That would
never
be
know.
pretty cool. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, we want
Taiwan's-
pictures and stuff like
Taiwan's new
that.
self-made submarine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot of interesting things going on. Looking forward to that. So.
So how are the people selected for this, Scott?
I'm not exactly sure. I got a phone call, asked if I would be interested in doing that. I said, I've got to talk to my wife about that, and sure enough, but I think it had to do with maybe the committees that you're on, State Federal Relations,
Right.
Judiciary, and Jess Ed.
Jess Ed.
Jess Ed was going with, he's chair of Finance 3, so that made sense as far as from the Taiwanese government's perspective. So.
That's
I don't
pretty.
know.
That's
So,
pretty cool.
I don't,
That's a great honor.
I don't think I was first choice. Somebody else probably said no. But,
I doubt that.
But hey, it's the luck of the draw. I'm happy to go.
have you ever been out,
Not that far.
traveled like that? You know, I don't.
The other direction.
Yeah,
Europe,
I've
yeah.
always gone the other direction.
Correct. So that should be interesting. Looking forward to the food. That should be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They have home distilleries there, I would guess, right?
I'm not sure. Well, they probably make the who knows? We'll find out.
Sake or no, they don't
That's-
drink sake. That's Japan. Yeah,
They probably used to during World War II when they were occupied by the Japanese, right?
yeah, I'm sure.
During the occupation. Well, does anyone object to talking about current events?
Certainly not.
Nope.
Okay.
Bring
so,
it on.
So last week, I kind of went over the history of this chunk of land called Palestine. Palestine is Israel, and Israel is Palestine. The name Palestine came about after the Romans had crucified Christ. They were done with this group of people. The Romans had had enough. The Jews had caused a lot of trouble, and especially this one man who was harassing the bankers and the merchants and whatnot. You know, all the reasons that they crucified Christ for. Afterwards, they decided they wanted to separate the land from the Jews, so they renamed it Palestine. The Romans named it Palestine, and they named it after the folks who had occupied that land prior to the Israelis, or prior to the Jews, 2,000 years before that. So in 2000 BC, the Philistines still occupied the land. The Jews came in and occupied the land for 2,000 years. It was called Israel. And then Rome changed its name to Palestine, but it was still occupied by the Jews. It was still a Jewish area. It was a Jewish governed area of the world, again, for the next 700 years until the 7th century when Islam was founded. So for 2,700 years, Palestine was known as a Jewish state. 2,700 years before Islam even became a religion. And then for the last 1,300 years, it was continually over, through different empires, including the Ottoman Empire, which wasn't disbanded until after World War I. All the way up through the Ottoman Empire, Palestine was a Jewish area of the Fertile Crescent. It was after the disbandment of the Ottoman Empire that the Balfour Declaration from the League of Nations decreed that the British will govern this chunk of land called Palestine. And the British began to allow Jews who were being persecuted in Northern Europe to immigrate there. And that is when, again, we're talking about 1920. That is when the Arabs in the area began to revolt against British colonialism. So it wasn't until the 1920s that any Arab group laid any type of claim to this chunk of land. So it's barely been a century, whereas the Jews occupied this land for the last 4,000 years. 4,000 years versus 100. And that's history that people don't really understand. And I went over that in much more detail last week. But that's where we're at. And people are just not educated on these matters. And people are brainwashed, especially our young college students. After the end of last week's show, our guest, Michael Moffat, and myself went downstairs, stepped out on the sidewalk, right into a group of Palestinian sympathizing protesters. I was in complete shock that this was here in Manchester. Stood there for a few minutes, kind of took it all in, decided it was not a situation I wanted to be a part of, and left. And as I left, and I drove back down Elm Street, an Israeli counter demonstration began to take place on this side of the street across from them. So I was kind of pleased with that. But that was all college students, and they don't have that education on what's going on, and they buy into all of the Palestinian and Hamas propaganda. And speaking of that, I'll kind of go through what's happened over the last 24 hours about propaganda. All right?
Yep.
And it's very simple to understand what actually took place yesterday. It is very simple. And I know that all the prognosticators, including myself on this show, because I've become one of them, is going to just go on about it forever. But it boils down to something very simple. For the last week and a half, we've seen video and we've seen all the footage of Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. And the Israelis are not using just smart bombs. They're using smart bunker-busting bombs.
Correct.
Because the Gaza is littered with tunnels underneath.
Yep.
And so when they choose a target, and we see these targets, we see entire buildings crumbling to the ground, and you've got these conspiracy theorists say, "Oh, that's not a bomb. Didn't make that entire building come down. One bomb didn't do that.
Sure it does.
That looks like it was controlled demolition. We see the whole building imploding in on itself." Well, the reason the building implodes in on itself after a single bomb is because it is a bunker buster. These bunker buster bombs are designed to penetrate through 12 or 13 layers, 12 or 13 stories of concrete to get to the bottom, to the base of a structure, and then explode from the bottom. And that's what we were seeing. We're seeing these buildings explode from the bottom and the entire building implode. And Israel's been using that to target very specific buildings. We've seen the video where a building implodes and everything else around it is left alone, right? And it's because they've got intelligence that says that this is where guns are being stored, this is where the Hamas has a headquarters, etc. And so we've seen that consistently over the last week and a half. So we know what Israel's using for bombs. Now, last night at 6:58 p.m. local time in Gaza, Hamas put out a telegram. Telegram is like Twitter or Facebook. They posted on Telegram, "We're about to release our most lethal barrage yet on Israel." That was at 6:58 local time. At 6:59 local time, all of the local television stations, including the international television stations, are showing video. 1 minute later, after Hamas says that they're going to launch something, are showing video of these rockets leaving Gaza City. A barrage of rockets leaving Gaza City. So we know at that exact moment, Hamas was launching a series of rockets. And then there's an explosion at a hospital inside of Gaza. Now, Hamas immediately came out and said, "Oh, the Israelis bombed a hospital and 300 babies were killed." Or 300 people were killed, right? And then Elon Omar picked that up and said, "Oh, there's over 500 dead at this hospital." And so this was like within seconds. Hamas was already posting all of this information. And then, hours later, Israel says, no, we weren't doing anything in the area. We had no planes in the air. We had no cruise missiles in the air. There was nothing going on. That wasn't us. It was a failed rocket from Hamas. And so now we've got two stories out there.
Correct.
Well, those two stories, guess who's going to believe which story, right? Guess who's going to believe the baby killing, bombing the hospital story? Well, all of the Palestinian protesters, all of the college students that we have here, they're all going to believe that story, and no one's going to believe the Israeli side of the story. But I have a very simple way of just ending that discussion. Any logical person would understand that. Because this morning, Hamas put out a whole bunch of pictures of the area that was supposedly bombed at the hospital. The only pictures they gave two sets of pictures. One set of pictures for the parking lot in front of the hospital, completely devastated. And they gave another couple of pictures from inside the chapel on the first floor of the hospital. Inside the chapel of the first floor of the hospital, there was very little damage, but all the windows were blown out. But in the parking lot, all the cars were burned out. There were char marks on the ground, on the pavement. But there was no crater on the pavement. All the cars were burned, but there was no crater on the pavement. And the hospital itself was just completely standing. Nothing was knocked down. So, in order to believe that the Israelis were responsible for this, you have to believe that after all this time, they decided not to use a bunker-busting bomb. They used something very, very mild in comparison.
Primitive.
That only destroyed a few cars in a parking lot. So the Israelis chose, okay, we're going to hit a hospital. We have to believe that part. We have to believe they chose not to use a bunker buster. And we also have to believe that they missed. After all of these spot-on, dead-on accurate hits, that the Israelis screwed up that bad, in addition to wanting to destroy a hospital. But they never did. So all of those things have to be believed in order to believe that the Palestinians didn't do this themselves. So anyway, that's why I say it's simple, because you look at the pictures and that's what you have to believe. Well, Israeli missed. They, for some reason, didn't use the most effective bomb that they had, and they chose to hit a hospital on purpose. Those things did not happen, right? And any logical person would take that information and say, yeah, why does that make any sense at all? So anyway, that's my rant on what's happened in the last 24 hours.
So what do you think of the president going over there and speaking? Did you see that today at all?
I did.
It
And
becomes
the man
very embarrassing.
It's a clown show.
He had index cards as to what
And he
to
couldn't
say.
even read off of those.
Yeah.
He forgot the name of Hamas and called them the other team.
The other team. Like it's a sport. You know, like killing
Disappointing.
people is a sport.
It is. It's absolutely embarrassing. It's maddening. I don't know if you saw when he got back on Air Force One or when he landed in Ramstein, because he's on his way home.
Yeah.
He did an impromptu kind of press conference right there on the plane with microphones in his face, and no cue cards or nothing. The man cannot spit out a complete sentence.
Yeah.
I don't know why they allow him to be in public. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's disappointing seeing that. I'd almost say it's elder abuse at this point, allowing him to continue.
I agree.
I've been saying that
disappointed in the family.
for over a year.
Yeah.
So when this is all over and people start getting prosecuted, there's a list of people who need to be prosecuted for elder abuse.
Including his wife.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane what
Because
you see.
Anyone who's paying attention has to realize that before he's put out in front of a camera, he is not only coached, he has coached, he's told what to do, where to go, where to stand. There's a piece of tape on the floor, go stand on it. When you're done, turn left and walk this way. And he can't even get that straight.
Well,
So he's being coached, he's being prepped, but at the same time, he's also being drugged. There's no way that man is not being put on a whole bunch of stimulants before he's put in front of a camera. And that's what people are not talking about.
well, it's, not only that, but then you have the squad. They should find a way to get those people out. The problem is those people live in an area that will just vote them in again. And that's disgusting. When you have a senator or congresswoman with a Palestinian flag in front of their office, when all of this is going on, to me, is disgraceful.
Yeah, it's tough. Minneapolis in Minnesota, that's the largest concentration of Muslims in the United States, and that's where she hails from. So they're going to reelect her, unfortunately.
And it's a very small group of 4 or 5 of these representatives that are actually buying into it, and they keep repeating the Hamas propaganda on their social media accounts. But like I said, it's a very small group. I've seen very few other Democrats, up to and including the President of the United States, who we don't really talk about in a good light very much, who understand that this was Hamas that hit the hospital last night. This is Hamas that started this problem. This is Hamas that needs to disappear off the face of this earth. And so I don't understand why the rest of the Democratic coalition in D.C. doesn't tell this squad to shut up.
But didn't he say he was going to give Iran $100 million? No. In the Gaza,
he's
right?
sending $100 million
for humanitarian.
Now I saw afterwards that doesn't happen until after this is over, but that is pledged, but it won't happen until after it's over. Because we've seen what happens to humanitarian aid before anybody makes any concrete changes in their behavior.
Right.
The Palestinians have already, or the Hamas, I should say, has already stolen something like 27,000 gallons of fuel from the United Nations, from UNICEF, who's in there on humanitarian missions. They've stolen all of their supplies inside the Gaza Strip. So even the humanitarians that are in there can't do anything because Hamas keeps stealing all of their supplies and their equipment.
Yeah.
It's insane. But that is not something that you're going to see these protesters around the world in New York City and all of these universities
Boston,
who they don't understand it. I don't understand, how do you end up in college without this basic ability to think for yourself and see what's going on in the world?
Exactly. And why is nobody calling the insurrection in Congress today an insurrection? Let's face it, right?
I did ask
government
that
business was stopped.
Yeah.
It's if they compare that to January 6th, it's the same thing. Congress couldn't do its work because of all the people in there demonstrating or protesting, quote unquote. But hey, you stop government business, that's an insurrection by their definition. Why don't we turn it around?
Yeah, every one of those needs a 10-year sentence, just like all the January 6th protesters.
That's right.
The difference is that the majority of them were actually inside the building today.
Correct.
Not only that, they were on several levels. I don't know if you saw any of the footage.
It was a mess.
I didn't.
They had taken over the main rotunda.
Correct.
And then on the second level, they had taken over the second level of the main rotunda. And it took hours. I don't know if it's still going on, but it was when I left. But the crowd was very large at first, and the Capitol Police basically closed off the rotunda.
Yeah, locked arms
And so that no one could go in or out, right? They got everybody else out of the building. And then they came in with all of the soft cuffs, the zip tie cuffs, and systematically, just one by one. They didn't try it all at once,
right?
But they were just taking them out one by one. Every one of them is going to be charged with some sort of trespassing. But at the time that the last time I saw it, it was at least 3 of them were being charged with assaulting an officer. And so they were very systematically just removing them one at a time. And they just, it was, mostly peaceful.
Going through the motions.
Right. They weren't really causing damage or anything. But what really angers me about that particular group, they're not even the typical Palestinian sympathizer groups. This was supposedly a group of Jewish students who were supporting the liberation of Palestine. And it's just this group is supposedly a Jewish group.
I have a suggestion for that Jewish group.
Anti-Israeli. We do know that there are a number of anti-Israeli Jewish groups, mostly in New York area. But this one was kind of a little bit. I think that's why they thought they could get more traction by calling themselves Jewish, or I don't know. But it's a little more frustrating that they don't know their own heritage.
Yeah, they probably ought to get onto YouTube and subscribe to the IDF YouTube channel and review some of that footage. They've got.
I try to avoid the more gory stuff.
Well,
because I'm not the audience that needs to see it.
Well, that's what
or
I'm saying.
Believe it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty disturbing. Yeah. They've got a lot of the GoPro and body cam and iPhone cams from the Hamas militia that they've captured or killed, and they've uploaded this to YouTube and shown what these savages were doing. It's not pretty. It's quite graphic, but it's very revealing, and people need to see this, and that's what's really going on. That the mainstream media should see this. They might change their tune a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week, where the mainstream media needs to get a little more aggressive on exposing the truth, right? It doesn't mean you have to put all that graphic material out there over the airwaves, but it does mean that you need to discuss the history, because it's a religious war. It's been going on for literally thousands of years.
Correct.
And, well, Muslim versus Jew has only been going on for 1,300 years because that's when Islam came to be. Mm-hmm. But the beginning of it was, again, the British occupation of Palestine after World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And the very first volley was the killing of 2 Jewish farmers. I mean, that was where it started. And there was retaliation against the Arabs at the time, and that went back and forth for several decades. And it's continuing to go back and forth. But the history shows that the Israelis and the Jews have never been the aggressors. And how the propaganda has turned to this point where half of the world thinks that is beyond me. There's a good 1/3 of all the countries on the planet are Arab and Muslim countries. Not a single one of those countries is willing to accept Palestinian refugees.
Right.
Not one.
That should speak volumes.
And it's because they know what's in Palestine is a majority of terrorism.
We've already got about a dozen C-17 Globemasters over there to haul refugees back, and they're coming here. So
it's maddening the fact that folks can't get through to the truth, right? And the truth doesn't necessarily mean that you have to listen to me, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to listen to CNN or Fox or whatever. It means you have to think for yourself. Like I said about the parking lot picture, it kind of showed me everything I needed to know that was not an Israeli bomb. Right?
Or it was a dud.
You just have to think about it.
Or a dud, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is there are things going on in the world that we are not privy to, and this is where we get into the conspiracy theory stuff. And I ended the show last week with just an outside thought that just popped into my head: conspiracy theory, right? And it stemmed from 2 news items right at the beginning of this particular war, right? So it was October the 7th or was it the 6th or the 7th that Hamas entered
Seventh.
into Israel.
7.
And this whole thing started. Now, Egypt claimed at that time that they warned Israel ahead of time, that they had intelligence. And Bibi Netanyahu, in one of his news conferences, said, no, that's false news. It never actually happened. No warning ever got to me. And so, of course, there'll be an investigation. Let's figure out if something had come up the line. But that was one piece of news, that there was some intelligence and some warning, but everyone was denying it at the time,
Right.
especially last week, or last Wednesday, everyone was still denying that any of that was true. The other piece of news that I knew about last week was about 3 days, so October 4th, before this happened, the Biden administration suddenly decided to close the border with Mexico. The Biden administration, the feds waived 26 federal laws, EPA laws, things like that, so that Texas could continue building the border wall. Said, all right, build that wall and get it up as fast as you can. And in fact, we're going to waive 26 federal regulations so that you don't have to worry about building a wall over some endangered worm or something like that, right? So they've waived all of these federal rules so that this wall can get built as fast as possible. And they did that on October 4th. And so my brain started thinking, so what suddenly changed? Because Biden said during his campaign that not 1 foot of border wall will be built during my administration.
Right.
He campaigned on that. And yet now he's waived 26 federal laws in order to do it. And he did so 3 days before this attack. And 3 days before this attack is when Egypt supposedly had enough intelligence to warn Israel. And so I was kind of putting those two things together. All of a sudden, the Biden administration doesn't want the ability for terrorists to walk into our borders undocumented. Now, since last week, I ended the show, said that's a conspiracy theory. It's way out of left field. Since last week, that is no longer a conspiracy. All right, the intelligence was there. We've seen from multiple sources. The CIA put out a document on October 3rd or October 4th warning that Hamas was gearing up. And we've now, the Egypt warning story now has 4 or 5 independent sources now. And so now, okay, the intelligence communities in the West knew that something was going to happen. So I don't think it's so much of a conspiracy anymore. The border wall is starting to be built, and folks are now really, really concerned about who got let into this country. So that's how I ended last week's show. Obviously, that's how we have to fill in this week's show. Any comments?
Well, they're coming in. I was out in Yuma, Arizona on the border back at the end of May, and just from that 170-mile section, 342,000 detainees last year and 85,000 gotaways that they know of. That's a 170-mile section of the 2,700-mile Mexican-U.S. border. Okay, and as far as why did the Biden administration waive those rules so that Texas could get going, I think that's because maybe light dawned on Marblehead and he finally realized that not enforcing the existing laws of this country is an impeachable offense on its own. Think about that for a minute.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, he is the chief executive of this country. He has to execute and enforce all of those laws. He can't willy-nilly say, I don't like this law, I'm not going to enforce it.
Right.
That's an impeachable offense right there. We don't need to have an inquiry. Just file it. It's done. We don't have to have an investigation. You haven't been enforcing the laws that, as they are written for this country, that's an impeachable offense.
Yeah.
So
Low-hanging fruit.
There's two explanations for the timing of that. So
Yep.
anyway, there's my radical conspiracy theory, and then we've got to go. We are out of time. We'll see you next week.